The Missing Pirate. Patch, a 13-year-old boy born with one eye, often dresses as a pirate, complete with a small dagger and a purple eye patch adorned with a silver star, lovingly crafted by his mother, Ivy Macaulay. One day in 1975, he stumbles upon his classmate Misty Mayer being attacked by a masked man. Patch bravely intervenes, but he's stabbed. As Misty escapes, Patch passes out. Patch's only friend, 13-year-old Saint, is a beekeeper. When she discovers her bees are missing, Saint barrels into her grandmother's bedroom and tells her, but she is dismissive. Saint ventures into the woods, hoping to find her bees nearby. Exhausted, she goes to the police station to report her missing bees. She sees Misty speaking to a police officer. Misty says the pirate kid helped her when a large man attacked her. Saint asks about his whereabouts, and Misty indicates the clearing by the old railroad. Saint finds blood there, but no Patch. The town of Montclair buzzes with the news. In the state of Missouri, 2 high school girls and a college kid had gone missing in the past 8 months. People gather, worried about the missing child. Police Chief Nix organizes a search. Ivy is distraught and drinks heavily. Saint is determined to find her friend. At church, she prays for his return. Misty tells Scout that she saw Dr. Marty Toombs in the woods that morning. He says he was searching for his dog, but Saint never saw one while she was looking for her bees. That same day, news spreads that Callie Montrose, a girl from a town near Montclair, also disappeared. At a vigil, Saint meets Callie's father, who shares memories of his daughter. Saint packs essentials and sneaks into the Macaulay house, where she finds Ivy asleep. She retrieves a one-shot flintlock pistol from Patch's room, vowing to bring him home. She bought him the pirate pistol for his birthday from a flea market. Saint is suspicious of Dr. Toombs and his dog Story. She knocks on his door, sees blood on his hands, and flees. Saint feels isolated and burdened without Patch. Chief Nix advises her to let go, but she continues searching. 3 months pass. Saint receives an old Nikon camera from her grandmother for Christmas. She takes photos of birds and watches the snow-covered town. She reads about trauma and forensic science, trying to stay connected to Patch. Ivy is facing eviction, so Saint gives Ivy all her saved money. Months later, she finds a suspicious ad for the man who is the school photographer. His name is Illy Aaron. He likes to hang around young girls, and his ad shows Misty smiling shyly. Saint calls Nix, but he dismisses her concern. She takes her grandfather's gun and sets out to confront Illy. She takes a bus, gets off near a woodland, and follows a path. A house appears, worn and weathered with outbuildings leaning with age. Illy is a large man with empty eyes. He speaks of snakes, scripture, and his love for the woods. She feels uneasy. Illy leads her to a dark room where she senses she's in danger. The tension snaps as he admits to the abductions of the missing girls Saint read about in the newspaper. Saint fumbles for her gun, but Illy disarms her with ease. She resorts to her slingshot, firing a desperate shot into the dark before running into the barn. The red-lit room reveals photographs of missing girls, their faces marked with halos. Monitors show every corner of the property, including a bunker where she glimpses a figure on a mattress. Determined to find Patch, she moves through the property. Illy chases her, firing a gun. She descends into a snake-filled underground room, the smell of chemicals thick in the air. A fire breaks out as she struggles to escape. She smashes a window with her slingshot, clawing her way out. She's dragged free by unknown hands. It's Chief Nix, and she is safe. Flames consume the house. Saint tells Nix everything she knows. Teams track blood trails deep into the woods. Illy has vanished. Whether he escaped or burned to ash, no one can say. When Nix offers to take her home, Saint runs. She runs for hours before she stumbles upon Patch. His eye twitches. He's injured and barely holding on. The cops surround them. Patch is darkness. Patch gives them his recollection of what happened to him. After he was taken, Patch found himself in complete darkness. He was cold and wondered if he was dead. Patch felt stitches and bruises on his body. In the dark, he felt a girl named Grace slip her hand into his. She gave him a pill and spoke of serendipity and fate. She told him to pray to survive. Patch thought of his mother and Saint. They prayed together, and Grace sang to him. Patch worked on loosening a brick in the wall. A man came and Grace recited Isaiah 12:2, speaking of hope and salvation. Patch smelled peach, sweat, and mildew on the man. When the man left, Grace made them exercise until Patch's muscles burned. They laughed together. That night, the man took Grace and Patch worked on the brick. When she returned, Patch held her close. She told him stories, bringing light to the dark room. The man entered and Patch acted. With the loosened brick, he struck. The man fell, but it wasn't over. Patch fought but felt himself slipping. Sick and weak, Patch let Grace's voice paint vivid worlds. Snowy streets, starlit skies, and the promise of freedom. Her words carried him far from the reality of his pain. She described her childhood home, a safe haven framed by protective trees and glowing flowers, and pressed him to hold on. Patch drifted in and out. He fell into darkness. He did not remember the fire, the gunshots, or letting her go. The search begins. In the hospital, powerful drugs are administered to stabilize Patch. Misty appears with flowers, asking if he's awake. Saint says he is sometimes. Misty asks about the photographer who used her school photo on his poster, and Saint confirms his involvement. Misty whispers about the fire, and Saint admits she started it. Chief Nix visits and apologizes for not listening to Saint. Patch wakes up on the 8th day, and they leave the hospital. In the car, Patch asks Nix to find Grace. At home, Patch feels disconnected, his room unfamiliar. Outside, he runs into Misty, but her boyfriend Chuck pulls her away. Patch steals a car and drives to the public library in Panora. He spends hours sifting through missing persons reports from every newspaper within 1,000 miles. One day, Saint appears beside him. Her grandmother is a bus driver, and her route passes nearby. Patch's focus stays on the grainy photo of Callie Montrose. Together, they recount Eli Aaron's horrors, his photographs, his land still being searched, the 3 bodies found with rosary beads wrapped around their throats. Saint notices the stolen car outside and offers to return the keys to Nix, hoping he'll dismiss the theft. Patch hands her the keys. He vows to burn everything in his path to find Grace. At home, Patch finds envelopes in the freezer labeled Final Demand, threatening debt collection and eviction. He calls the agency, claiming his mother will work again. That night, while she sleeps, he takes her cleaning supplies to Main Street. He starts at the Jasper and Coates Law Office, where he polishes mahogany. Patch cleans 4 offices, a craft store, and a typewriter shop, reaching Montclair Fine Art by 4 a.m. Inside, he meets Sammy, the owner of Montclair Fine Art, who recognizes him as the boy who saved the mayor girl. Sammy advises him to clean the art without chemicals. Patch works carefully, then sits and sketches Grace. He never saw her face, but he traces the memory of her skin, her lips, the arch of her brow, and the fall of her hair. Her hair shifts in each image: fiery red, soft auburn, stark blonde, or deep black. Patch posts notices and calls hospitals as he searches. Chief Nix visits his house, urging him to see Dr. Toombs. Nix claims Patch's mind conjured Grace to keep him going, but Patch insists Grace is real and needs help. Patch watches Chuck and his pals tear down his posters. He calls them gutless. Chuck accuses Patch of littering. Patch challenges them. A shove leads to punches and kicks. Misty intervenes. The group retreats and Misty helps Patch retape his posters. She invites him to dinner. Saint and Patch visit Ellie's burned house. Patch shows Saint a picture of rosary beads. They explore the area. Patch suspects Grace might be Callie Montrose. That night, Patch cleans until his body aches. At the gallery, Sammy accuses Patch of stealing paper. Patch denies it, but Sammy says he won't clean there again. Feeling defeated, Patch leaves behind the papers with the sketches of Grace on them. Saint helps Patch prepare for dinner with Misty, pulling clothes from his dead father's belongings. Saint has been writing to various agencies about missing persons while trying to bring Patch back to some sense of normalcy. At dinner with Misty and her wealthy family, Patch endures the formalities, feeling out of place though he has a crush on Misty. Afterward, Misty seeks a deeper connection by sharing stories about her family, but Patch, burdened by his past, pushes her away. Sammy sees Patch's sketches and offers him a chance to paint in his studio. He says Patch should bring Grace to life through painting. Patch paints Grace, though he's struggling with each brush stroke. His art skills grow. Sammy declares the painting finished. They take it to the police station, where Nix is captivated by its detail. By 1978, Patch has quit school to work in the St. Francois mines. His relationship with Misty has grown, and they're going to prom together. He paints missing girls and sends the paintings to their families. Sammy plans a show of Patch's paintings that depict Grace and her stories, but Patch is unsure about selling them. Saint has been accepted to Dartmouth, but she's reluctant to leave her grandmother Norma. Saint works at Panora's library, still searching for Grace. She contacts coroners and hospitals, while Patch also searches for missing teens. Jimmy Walters asks Saint to prom, and she eventually agrees to go with him, encouraged by Norma. Saint arranges for reporters to cover Patch's art show. At the show, Patch refuses to sell Grace's painting. At the drugstore, Saint runs into Ivy. They share a quiet moment, reflecting on their lives. Ivy's hand trembles as she admits to sleepless nights and haunting memories. Ivy tries to refill her sleeping pills, only to be told there are no refills left. Ivy leaves empty-handed, her desperation evident. The pharmacist and assistant follow Ivy outside to check on her. Saint sees the papers the assistant dropped. The name printed across the top is Martin Toombs. Saint slips the pages into her pocket. Later, in the quiet of her room, Saint unfolds the prescriptions and scans the details. The refills began the day after Patch was taken. On prom night, Misty's father, Franklin Mayer, gives Patch a glass of brandy, and they sit on the terrace, waiting for Misty. Franklin is afraid Misty may not want to leave for Harvard. Patch quietly agrees to talk to her. Franklin reaches into his pocket and gives him a check. Franklin tells Patch he will die grateful to him. Patch and Misty dance at the prom. Misty declares that their love will make a long-distance relationship work, but Patch doubts it. He breaks up with her, the check heavy in his pocket. Later that night, Saint, in her prom dress, searches Toombs' house. She finds a hidden cellar, leading to an investigation. Nix and Deputy Harkness arrive. They find a hidden door, revealing a mattress soaked in blood. Diverging Paths. In 1982, Saint and Nix are driving across Route 9, stopping at a gas station to take a statement from an old man about a robbery. As they eat in a diner, Saint, in a too big cop's uniform, is still processing the day's work. They briefly discuss the situation with Patch, who bought a house for his mother with money from selling paintings, giving her security at last. Saint has filed another request to visit Marty Toombs, but Nix doubts that Toombs will cooperate. They discuss the ongoing trial, with Toombs pleading not guilty to Callie Montrose's murder. Patch has written numerous letters to Toombs, which Saint read before delivering. Sometimes Patch rambled about his life, other times he pleaded for Toombs' salvation, and on dark days he cursed him. They work on a victim impact statement, with Saint writing as Patch speaks about the horror he endured. Toombs remains silent in court, even as his lawyers try to have him declared insane. Hair samples from Ellie Aaron's house match Toombs, and blood samples from Toombs' house match Callie Montrose. Toombs shows emotion only when asked about the location of Callie's body. He silently cries. He's convicted and sentenced to death. Saint wonders how he and Ellie met. Ivy dies and Patch leaves Montclair. He's still searching for Grace, meeting families of missing girls and painting their portraits. Low on funds, he robs a bank at gunpoint, but later donates most of the money to a missing persons charity. Saint has dinner with Norma and Jimmy. He talks about his studies and work at the Culpeper Zoo. After dinner, Saint and Jimmy walk to Main Street. They admire antiques and Jimmy holds Saint's hand. He suggests life would get easier with her grandmother if she hands in her badge and goes back to school. He hints at starting a family. Patch travels on, painting portraits of missing girls. He robs another bank. In Washington, D.C., Patch dines with Sammy, who's highly successful as an art dealer. They talk about Misty, who's at Harvard. Sammy takes Patch to his penthouse. Patch drinks from the minibar while Sammy sleeps. He thinks about Grace and vows to find her. Patch works hard, hauling freight and cleaning boats, always searching for Grace. In Boston, he reconnects with Misty for a night. Patch realizes he can't stay and leaves Misty. Saint wears a simple ivory gown for her wedding to Jimmy, who's studying to become a veterinarian. Saint exchanges vows but glances at Patch. After the ceremony, she finds Patch outside, and they share a moment. Soon after the wedding, the FBI contacts Saint. She travels to Kansas City, where Himes, a senior agent, asks her to help find a bank robber. The robberies stretch from Lawton to Austin. The suspect uses a rare flintlock pistol, a pirate gun. Himes chose her for the assignment because she previously found Patch when no one else could. Himes knows about her search for Grace. He hands her a file about a new body discovered near Misty Moon Lake, with rosary beads nearby. The victim is named Angela Rossi. By 1983, Saint is spending weekdays in Kansas City and weekends at home. Jimmy has become distant since failing his exams. On Thanksgiving, she cooks a family meal. Norma frets about Jimmy's drinking and weight gain. She's concerned about Saint's marriage and Jimmy's fragile ego. Saint reveals to Norma that she's pregnant. She visits a clinic, wondering what to do. Back home, she says she visited a clinic to get an abortion, and a drunken Jimmy doesn't let her finish what she has to say. He viciously attacks her. Saint divorces him and focuses on work. Patch calls Saint, who tells him he can't run forever. He replies that he's not running. He's searching and helping others search for every Grace lost. She tells him that when the time comes, she'll have to take him down. I know, he replies. Saint spends days searching through Patch's interview tapes about Grace and the stories she told him in the dark. Finally, she realizes his movements aren't random, they mirror locations Grace told him about. She calls Himes, confident she knows where he's headed next. A week later, Saint reaches San Carlos, a small town. She checks into a hotel and waits. For 3 days, she barely sleeps. When she finally hears a radio alert, she rushes to the scene. Saint arrives at the bank before the cops, speaks to a teller, and learns a robber fled in a Chevy. She follows the trail until the road ends at Fish Creek Hill. She parks and approaches cautiously. Patch turns, and she sees the boy she once knew. He speaks of a missing girl named Alois Strike, thinking she might be Grace. Saint has to bring him in, but he resists. He turns to run, and she pulls the trigger. Between redemption and loss, the James Conner Correctional Facility lies hidden in soybean fields. In 1990, the locks turn and Patch appears, walking with a slight limp from the bullet that wounded his leg. Patch and Saint exchange smiles in a brief, tight embrace. Saint fights the urge to ask if he's okay, knowing how much 6 years in prison can change someone. She drives him home. Sammy visits Patch. After a few drinks, they go back to the gallery, where Patch sees his paintings. He lingers over Alois Strike and Callie Montrose. The gallery has a sack of letters from the missing girl's parents. Patch needs work because he is on parole, so he allows the gallery to show his art. At the gallery, he sees Misty, and her smile slows his world. Saint and Nix talk about going back to Toombs's farmhouse, hoping to find human remains. Later, Saint shares a quiet moment with Patch. They drink coffee and talk about the uncertainty of the future. Patch speaks of needing closure, and she talks about Jimmy, who left town. Patch meets with Misty at a diner. He learns that she dropped out of college and moved back to Montclair to be with her widowed mother. He speaks of Toombs, Grace, and a place where memories linger. He feels a need to visit, though he doubts he'll find answers. Misty, understanding his need, suggests they go together. They stop by a box canyon, imagining Grace's body returned to the earth. They hike through steep hills. Toombs described leaving a girl's body in the dirt. Patch scans the landscape, following a vague map from Saint that suggests the route Toombs took. They climb a steep path, with Patch convinced that Toombs couldn't have carried a body this far. When they near an access road, Misty recalls a storm that blocked the area. If the road was blocked, Toombs couldn't have buried a girl here. They drive back silently. At home, he calls Saint. He suspects that Toombs lied and Grace may be alive. When Patch visits Misty, he discovers that they have a 7-year-old daughter named Charlotte from their night together. Misty explains that she didn't want to burden Patch, and her mother didn't want him near Charlotte. Sammy encourages him to be there for Charlotte. Patch decides to settle in Montclair, selling paintings for money. He demolishes his old home and builds a new one. Misty reveals that she has a terminal illness, and Patch embraces her. Saint discovers skeletal remains in Quartz Mountain State Park. The same rosary beads are next to the bones. The victim is named Sky Jones. Patch struggles with Misty's rapid decline from cancer in the summer of 1993. Misty tells Charlotte stories of the past, and Patch teaches Charlotte to paint. They watch fireworks on New Year's. At Misty's funeral, Patch struggles to comfort Charlotte. She moves in with Patch, slowly adjusting to her new home. She compares his cooking to her mother's and refuses it. He offers to tell her a story, which she dismisses as for children. He tells it anyway, about a madman traveling California and Alaska, inspired by a lost girl. He sits outside her door, listening to her breathing. In 1995, Saint enjoys a meal with Patch and Charlotte, who has made a detailed map of missing girls. Each color on the map represents a different fate: blue for abducted, green for runaways, orange for vanished, and red for dead. Later, Saint listens to Patch's old interview tapes, marking locations on her own map. Saint follows the clues to a church in Black Rock. She learns that Eli's real name is Robert Frederick, and he was raised in an orphanage. A nun says the name Eli Aaron comes from a Bible story about justice, and Robert believed in harsh judgment for sinners. Robert was an altar boy until he followed an unmarried pregnant woman home one day. She was not harmed, but he ran. The nun says that a man has bought rosary beads at the church. They realize that it is Eli. Charlotte, turning 13, wants a party and gifts. Patch arranges everything. Patch and Charlotte visit Misty's grave in the zoo, where Patch faints from the heat. He awakes in a room with Jimmy Walters. Jimmy says Charlotte is feeding the meerkats with Keeper Jen. Patch confronts Jimmy for wronging Saint. Knowing he can't let his daughter grow up in a world where good people do nothing, Patch strikes out at him, killing the zookeeper. The pirates escape. In 1998, Patch's prison window is small. Beyond it, he can see a water tower and telephone cables. He watches the construction of a new prison. His routine is rigid. He leaves his cell at 7, eats a light breakfast, and works diligently in the prison library. Patch is responsible for the art collection and often helps others with self-help materials. The prison library is bright, and Patch organizes books, overseen by 2 librarians. Cooper, one of the librarians, started working shortly after Patch arrived. He's tall and authoritative, and the 2 of them adjusted well to working together. Saint is now the respected police chief of Montclair, and she's caring for Charlotte until Patch's release in less than 4 years. After 513 days, Patch writes a letter to the warden, and 2 months later, he's escorted out of his cell. A guard named Blackjack leads Patch to the warden's office. Warden Riley leads Patch to a desk. Behind Riley is a painting Patch recognizes. It was his first sale, a painting of Grace's house. Riley's wife, Eileen, chose it for the office. Patch requests a library service for C-level inmates, the ones on death row. He believes reading is a right, not a privilege. Riley agrees. The death row cells are narrow and grim. Patch enters with a canvas bag of books. Inside the cells, the men have made their spaces personal, with posters, radios, and a few decorations. Some men take books. When Patch reaches the final cell, he hesitates. For a long time, Patch struggles to speak. He rehearsed his words, but now feels nothing but anger and confusion. Toombs apologizes, his hands trembling. In 7 months, Toombs will be executed. Patch's voice wavers as he asks if Toombs killed Grace. Toombs turns to the window and begins to cry. Patch waits each week for his time with Toombs. Patch shares stories of Grace's dancing. He expresses his regrets about not seeing Charlotte grow up. Norma dies, and Saint feels Patch's absence at her funeral. After a fight with other inmates, Patch ends up in a solitary cell. A kid in the next cell, White, speaks to him, revealing he's 19 and scared. Patch offers comfort. White mentions the painting in Warden Riley's office. He says it depicts a town near where he grew up, Grace Falls, Alabama. This sparks hope in Patch. Saint and Charlotte clear her grandmother's property to build an art studio for Charlotte. They find bones near the neighboring Toombs house. Saint also investigates the murder of Callie's father, Richie Montrose, at his house. Beside his body lies a note. Richie Montrose, I'll see you in hell. Security footage from a neighbor's camera reveals the killer clearly. It's Nix. She confronts him. Nix hints at secrets before shooting himself, leaving Saint devastated. That night, Patch is out of solitary and sweeping the floors in the metal shop when the power goes out. Warden Riley has been planning to replace the unreliable old generator. Patch continues working under dim emergency lights. After finishing, he stores his cleaning supplies and goes to the library, where Cooper's working. Cooper asks for help with boxes and Patch obliges. Patch returns to his cell, reads a book, and is locked in for the night. Cooper leaves the library with a satchel containing a book, an apple, and a newspaper. Blackjack, reading about sports, buzzes Cooper out. That night, Cooper walks with a limp. Grace falls. A call about Joseph Macaulay's escape awakens Saint. 100 miles south, Patch sits by a bluff, watching the Mississippi River. He is heading to Tennessee, one step closer to Grace. Saint drives to a nondescript apartment complex to get a statement from Cooper. He speaks of a quiet life, a decade in public libraries before joining the prison staff. As she turns to leave, her eyes catch a faded photograph beside the bed, a dark-haired girl. She looks familiar. Cooper smiles at her. He reveals that his full name is Cooper Strike. Cooper resembles Patch in build. Guards were either complicit or negligent in the escape, and the warden's fury grew as every lead seemed to hit a wall. Saint receives a call about a construction worker, Owen Williams, who claims it was a mistake when he cut a power cable at the prison. But Owen's daughter, Lucy, is one of the missing girls Patch painted. Saint revisits the abduction file on Patch. Marty Toombs always stuck to his story about searching for a dog named Scout. He said the dog appeared on his land from the woodland behind. Saint traces the land boundaries on her map. The dog's appearance lined up with the edge of Norma's property, where dense shrubbery made it impossible for a person to pass. Saint and Charlotte find canine bones and a gold tag in her grandmother's yard. Saint fishes the tag from the trash and washes it. The letters Scout emerge. Saint races to stop Toombs' execution, and he's spared. Toombs tells her that he used to help pregnant girls by offering them an abortion, especially if they were poor or fearful of strict families. Toombs hung around schools in case anyone needed him. That's what he was doing when L.A. Aaron arrived to photograph the children. He knew L.A. was bad after hearing him with Misty, promising to make her a model. Toombs went to Eli's farmhouse and told him he was watching him. That's why his hair fibers were found there. But Eli was also watching Toombs, and he chose victims from the girls who came to the farmhouse for help. Saint asks about Callie Montrose, and Toombs cries, revealing he couldn't stop the bleeding. He says that he loved Nix from their first meeting, despite society frowning on it. The night Callie died, Toombs told Nix to call it in, but he wouldn't. Nix wanted the truth about Callie's pregnancy, but Toombs refused to betray her. Nix suspected something was wrong because Callie had come to see him. She was very upset, and he sent her back home, unaware that her father raped her. Toombs was the one who wrote the note to Richie. Toombs told Nix to bury Callie somewhere beautiful, but Toombs never knew where. Toombs gets out of prison. Patch calls Charlotte from a phone booth. He apologizes and tells her that he's found Grace. It's a place called Grace Falls, just like the painting. She whispers that she believes him, but there are cops looking for him, including Saint. He hears Saint's voice. Saint receives a call from Himes, who had a trace on her telephone line. She takes the first flight to Alabama. Patch wanders through Grace Falls. He asks a waitress about the house. He's searching for a white house with tall trees and a winding staircase. She knows the house. As Saint rushes to Grace Falls, Patch makes it to the house and knocks. 700 miles away, White endures another day in solitary. The thin mattress, the constant drip of water, and the hunger make him question his toughness. In shame, he cries before demanding to see the warden. He claims to know the pirate's whereabouts. Patch knocks repeatedly, but no one answers. The back door is locked. As he's about to circle the house, the sound of distant thunder grows louder. Himes calls Saint and warns that Alabama state troopers and local police are closing in. He gives her the location of the house. As lightning strikes, Patch runs to the nearby barn. He shuts the door behind him, plunging the space into darkness. Exhausted, he sits on the hard wooden slats. Tears threaten as he reflects on the years he has lost in his search. Then he feels a hand slip into his. In the dark barn, Patch hears Grace telling him to leave because she fears her father, L.A. Aaron. She tells him that Ellie targeted Misty after seeing her photo, smiling on the day of the Roe v. Wade abortion decision. He spared Patch because he wore a cross, but wouldn't let him go. Lightning flashes and he sees red hair and green eyes, eerily like his first Grace painting. Saint drives through the storm to the house. She searches for life but finds none. In the barn, she finds a dark room. She sees terrifying photos, including one of her teenage self. A hand covers her mouth. Ellie attacks Saint, but Patch saves her, killing him. As sirens approach, Patch tells Saint to look after Grace, and she says she will. Saint tells everyone that Joseph Macaulay escaped. When she tells Himes, he stares at her for a while, but doesn't question her. The aftermath. By 2001, a sweeping investigation has covered 17 states. Ely also took victims from girls he saw when he was camping, but the last body has been recovered. Saint gets a medal for her work. Grace is not mentioned in any report about the case. Sammy has become close to Mary, Misty's mom. Charlotte calls him Grandpa. Sammy sells a valuable painting and brings the money to Marty Toombs so he can own his farm free and clear. Saint visits a farm where her son Theodore is thriving. She brings money from a painting she sold to help his adoptive family. She does not want to tell him about the adoption, but she does want to know about him. She learns that he keeps bees. In late summer, Charlotte and Saint pack Saint's truck and leave before dawn. Charlotte's heading to Boston for college. She plans to become a lawyer and help poor defendants. They plan a leisurely 2-week trip to get there. Saint receives a jar of purple honey from an unknown sender. The label leads them to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. There are pirate flags everywhere, as pirates are part of the area's history. They look for sailboats with a pirate flag. After days of watching, they find him. He's been out sailing every day, hoping they will come. Patch and Charlotte embrace, and he shows her how to paint the ocean. Saint tells him about Theodore. She asks why Patch doesn't leave the country, and he explains that he promised Charlotte he'd always be there for her. Patch says Grace has been sending him letters. Patch shows Saint a painting. He has kept only one for himself, but he insists she take it with her. The painting shows 2 figures lying beneath the stars, a pirate and a beekeeper.